when I arrived there, I think in the summer of '95, Nick Glennie-Smith who had been assisting Hans for a while. As I say, Mike Streidenfeld was his excellent tech, and there were a couple of other dudes, I can't remember their names, just who were doing whatever they were doing, and that's about it, really. So there was lots of potential and opportunity, but people often ask me, what was this sort of plan?
Yeah.
I don't know about what Hans would say, but he'd probably say the same as me. I don't think there really was a plan at that stage. It's like, do you want to have a go at this? Yeah, well, get on with it. Let's give it a go.
Okay. So you worked closely with Hans
Yeah.
on a number of projects.
Yeah.
At what point was it clear that you...
Well, actually, I guess 18 months passed really, really quickly, and I barely came out to see the light of day. And I'd always been a kind of pen and paper guy. And Hans, this is one of the reasons I was kind of locked in this closet, was to learn the software that he uses, which is Cubase, which I now use. Okay. But I learned very, very quickly. I was immersed in a certain way of going about organizing the composition of music, and it really appealed to me because I didn't know anything about. It hadn't even occurred to me that people would use like banks of computers to mock up an orchestral sound. I knew about synthesizers and whatnot, but.
Right.
That really, I didn't need to, I would have been happy if someone had thrown away the key of the closet. I was so stoked. I was just immersed myself in that, whatever tasks I could get, arranging this or doing a cue for one of Hans' movies, or, helping him with this or that. I just, dived into it, and it really, really appealed to me. It was so different to anything I'd ever done. And, I was getting really stimulated with music specifically to pictures, and I was able to watch, his thing, the way he would go about things, his mistakes and his successes, and not be the kind of fall guy, if you know what I mean. Be in the background and have some responsibility, but not have everybody bearing down on me. And I was able to make mistakes and be yelled at, which is fine. Have to get up and get on with it. But after about 18 months, I was at Hans's birthday party one night. He invited a few of his friends, and I was sitting opposite a guy, Dan Ireland, who said to me, "I really want to get to Hans. I want him to do my movie. I know Hans really well, but I've only ever really produced films, but I directed this film. It's called The Whole Wide World, and I really want Hans to do it. Put in a good word, or mention it to him." So later that night, I think I got a ride with Hans home or whatever, and I said, "Man, Danny really wants you to do this movie." He's like, "You can do it. How about you do it?" I'm like, "Really?"
This is Hans now saying,
"Yeah,
yeah, you should do it." Okay.
I said, "Well, look, you do it. Well, Danny will trust me. You do it, and like if you fall flat on your face, I'll be there, and we'll sort it out." So I did, and that was after that. I never really worked on Hans's movies.
Right, yeah.
After that. I was kind
essentially had your own career.
I would say career, but I had my own path very much, to which I was sort of hurtling down that path, whether I liked it or not. Then I could probably have done with a few more years of apprenticeship, actually. But there you go.
I don't know about that.
But that was really key to having a score to do, and like a real live director.
One of the things you mentioned that you essentially would be a pen and paper kind of guy. And yet technology seems to be such a strong component in all of the work today. So could you talk a little bit about how you embrace that, if in fact that's the right word?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I have. That's not to say I don't use pen and paper, but one of the things that Hans taught me was that it's like our demos are going to be better than anybody's. So I'm like, "How's that, Hans?" He said, "Well, forget the music for a second. We'll assume that the music's going to be right, but they're going to sound fantastic. And this is what's got to happen. You've got to really, really work at programming, not just sloppily, but really, really, really intricately. And coupled with that, at that time, he decided to sample an orchestra, which I don't think many people had done that. Probably couldn't afford to do that.
Right.
But Hans did that, and I conducted it, which is a pretty gnarly task, actually. There's not much conducting to do. It's like the poor old fourth desk of the violas. Okay, C, mezzo forte.
And they're playing.
Play, yeah. And then D.
It's
and
cueing,
then,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So having done that, I was like, okay, well, you can have the samples, because they're not publicly available. So really good sounds, a really sound knowledge of the platform that I was using, which just happened to be Cubase. It could have been Logic or any of these things.
Right.
But I had a couple of fundamental problems early on, which was, in order to play Hans's samples, you needed like 20 samplers. I couldn't afford that. They were so expensive at that time. And I think things have cheapened up, but I couldn't afford that. So the next thing was to get a bank loan, which I did. And on the premise that, that would probably be smart. I mean, I couldn't partake of this thing because the samples were so huge in volume. It required all these. So anyhow, all these obstacles were thrown away, but one just got on with it, and so now fabulous sounding orchestra in front of me. I mean, it's just so stimulating, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm sure these days one can buy it. They're probably reasonably expensive, but there are orchestras like the orchestra I'm referring to available.
Absolutely.
Other people have gone out and done that. But that was really, really stimulating. I don't think I could have really shut myself away for so many months that turned into years if like everything sounded crap, even if I knew it was gonna sound great with the live orchestra.
Right.
I just wouldn't have been any fun.
Right. I think a lot of the young composers today fall into a reliance on the technology, and it doesn't always sound that good. And yet you have managed to really have both. You're brilliant as an orchestral writer. You know the orchestra. You know how to make the orchestra sound really good. And at the same time, the way you work with technology is truly second to none. We were talking earlier about you literally have defined a genre in terms of combining orchestral writing with the technology that's available today.
As I said to it earlier, I do hope not. I haven't defined it because from where I sit, I've been really fortunate, and really critically, I've had a few opportunities that either you might say I've been just really lucky to have, or like I really sort of tried to make happen. Anyhow, it doesn't matter how one gets there, perhaps, but once an opportunity pops up, to really stop at nothing to go for it, and then try and maintain that, if not build on something. But from my perspective, I'm always looking forward and up, and that's one of the things. I moved away from Media Ventures, from Hans's place, several years ago now. Not for any weird reason. Like Hans and I are just as great friends as we now as we always were, but more that he cast a damn great shadow. Like,
hard to get out from under. Huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So and by the way, I was always drinking. It was him who put the coffee in the coffee machine. It was him who mended, painted the walls if they were, it's about time I stood up and got my own, took responsibility for what I was doing. So that was brilliant, and so I moved away to not far, like a mile down the road, and have my own studio, and I have a few people working with me, very much on the same lines as. Hopefully, as I did when I first came to America, what goes around comes around. Because obviously I'm often asked how would you recommend to break into this thing, and unfortunately I don't have a really good answer for that, because I do feel from my own point of view so many moons aligned just right. I mean, I bumped into Hans. If I hadn't have done that. It's not really talking about the music at this point, more about how did you have that opportunity? Well, a series of things. But more than that, I've 3 or 4 cracking young composers at my studio who are making their own way too. And you know, that part of what Hans was like, okay, we put in your work doing this, you know, take what you like from how I go about things, and then go your own way. But it's interesting. It's nothing. I don't have it's nothing like Media Ventures in that respect. It's not a factory of people, but it is. You know, like I have
the team,
a permanent music editor.
Right.
You know, someone who's like with me. You know, those sort of things. I can't imagine being so random, just going from one film and having a whole set of different people around me. You know, got to trust someone to record the stuff out of my room, the stuff that I sequence. You know, has got to sound exactly as I hear it when it gets to the mix room. And in order to feel comfortable about that, you know, inevitably one finds someone you really can trust. I mean, like, grab them, say, come work with me. When I arrived there, I think in the summer of '95, Nick Glennie-Smith had been assisting Hans for a while. As I say, Mike Streidenfeld was his excellent tech, and there were a couple of other dudes, I can't remember their names, just who were doing whatever they were doing, and that was about it, really. So there was lots of potential and opportunity, but it was to learn the software that he uses, which is Cubase, which I now use. But you know, I learned very, very quickly. I was immersed in a certain way of going about organising the composition of music, and it really appealed to me because I didn't know anything about I guess 18 months passed really, really quickly, and I barely came out to see the light of day. And you know, I've always been a kind of pen and paper guy. And Hans is one of the reasons I was kind of locked in this closet. It hadn't even occurred to me that people would use like banks of computers to mock up an orchestral sound. Yeah, I knew about synthesizers and whatnot, but that really, I didn't need to. You know, I would have been happy if someone had thrown away the key of the closet. I was so stoked. I was just immersed myself in that, whatever tasks I could get. But people often ask me, what was this sort of plan?
Yeah.
I don't know about what Hans would say, but he'd probably say the same as me. I don't think it really was a plan at that stage. It's like, do you want to have a go at this? Yeah, well, get on with it. Let's give it a go.
Okay. So you worked closely with Hans on a number of projects.
Yeah.
At what point was it clear that